The portrait artist Gottfried Lindauer holds a special place in New Zealand history. He painted hundreds of subjects, many of them noted figures in the colony. But the work that has received most of the attention are his portraits of Māori from the 19th century. These paintings have provided a portal into our past.
Ihaka Whaanga. Ihaka had 3 wives, 17 children and many hundreds of descendants, and we are but 2 of those descendants. This is our story about the significance of the Lindauer portrait of Ihaka Whaanga. Ihaka was born around 1800 in the Mahia Peninsula. He was the youngest of 6 sons. Being the Portuguese is auspicious in itself, but he had this quite auspicious rise to chieftainship through the fact that he was the sole survivor from his family. Ihaka's father, Te Rātou, had an ongoing feud with his cousin, Te Mātinga, in order to try and take power in the Mahia region. Te Mātinga had invited Te Rātou over to a feast on the mainland. Te Rātou put his 6 sons into the waka with himself and they went to travel across. As the canoe departed, the tōhanga, Te Toiroa, started to smell this burning meat coming across from the mainland, and he thought, this is not right, trouble awaits. And so he swam after the waka. And supposedly Te Toiroa pulled the infant Ihaka, who was sitting at the very back of the canoe, off and then swam back ashore with him. There's a lot of things that Ihaka derives mana from that story, not only being the sole survivor, because indeed Te Rātou and Ihaka's brothers all met their death when they went across because Te Mātinga and his people slaughtered them. But also, Te Toiroa was a very famous tōhanga. He was the tōhanga who allegedly predicted the arrival of Cook in 1769 and also the birth of Te Koshi. So that same tōhanga was the one who saved Ihaka and nurtured him and helped him to grow to manhood. That feud between Te Mātinga and Ihaka, the child, continued, and as Ihaka got into adulthood, that feud was eventually resolved. What we got was the arrival of Christianity came into the area, and through the missionaries, both Te Mātinga and Ihaka both adopted Christianity, and that's where we assume that Ihaka took on the name of Ihaka, meaning Isaac. Of course, like with all families, feuds don't just end there. A new feud arose between Te Mātinga and Ihaka as to who was the one who became Christian first. And so there was a lot of struggle for mana and struggle for authority as saying, well, I was the first one to make peace. I was the first one to become a Christian. And that kind of feuding, I guess, is representative right throughout Ihaka's lifetime and indeed actually even for Māori today. Ihaka was a great proponent of land sales, and he actively encouraged Europeans to come into the area. Through European settlement, that there was more trade, more intermarriage, that there was greater opportunities for his people. He saw that as a very strategic approach to make sure that his people were not left behind, I suppose, in what he saw as the way of the future. He was a man who was seeing the world changing around him in ways that his father and his father before him would have never experienced. So not only with the advent of Christianity and the bringing in of literacy and new skills and new technology, but also new ways of doing things. And Ihaka was a firm and enthusiastic supporter of lots of new technologies. He received a letter from his relation, Hinare Mātua, and in it Hinare had said to Ihaka, "Oh, I'm not sure about all these workings we're doing with Pākehā and all these relationships we're building with them." And his words to Ihaka were, "You know Europeans well, Ihaka, they don't do things gratuitously." Well, he was right. Ihaka did know Europeans well, and he did know that they didn't do things gratuitously. What Hinare should have known as well, though, was that Ihaka didn't do things gratuitously either. Ihaka had his own plan, he had his own sense of purpose, he had his own agenda, and the decisions that he was making were really his best call on how to do the best for him and his people. He died in Māhia in 1875. At the time of his death, he was definitely acknowledged as the paramount rangatira of the Māhia and Ihaka area. There was a lot of European respect and a lot of European recognition of him at the time of his death. The portrait of Ihaka, which Lindauer painted, was not painted from a real-life sitting. Ihaka was dead by the time that Lindauer painted that portrait. What we have is Lindauer painting that portrait from a photograph. That photograph was taken by Samuel Carnell. It's interesting to compare those to the images that we have from Samuel Carnell, where his moko is less pronounced. There was definitely an attempt to stylise Ihaka's moko through both the taking of the photograph and doctoring it, so to speak, and then taking that image and painting it so that the moko was a very symmetrical image of him.
The spiral tattooed warrior was a much more interesting type than modern Māori, but it didn't necessarily reflect Ihaka's life or his reality.
He definitely wasn't the traditional old man in a cloak that we see with Lindauer.
He was a contemporary man of his times.
Fundamentally, we're left with an image of a man who had great mana, an image of a man who, through all of his integrity and well-intention, was trying to do the best thing for his people.
By adding our voices and our understanding of what that portrait is, it demystifies it and actually tells a whole lot more about where we've come from and who we are.
There's a real sense of mana and pride that we whakapapa to someone of such greatness. His image is enduring now for generations to come.
Lindauer was taught at the Academy of Fine Art in Vienna, and his teachers were very interested in the Nazarene school, which was a 19th century type of painting. With his style, he tended to draw out the image on the white ground, and then he'd apply these glazes, or transparent layers of oil over the top. I think he was a very skilled technician. He was very skilled with his brushwork as well. There's very fine brushwork around the eyes. I've seen quite a few Lindauer forgeries, and they can never match his skill in brushwork.
In the early 1970s, Lindauer had been shunted to the back rooms. The modernists thought they were really second-rate, of no artistic merit. Suddenly, Māori started coming forward and saying, well, we don't care about your ideas of what's modern or not, or even the quality of these work. The fact is, these are spirit catchers. These are ancestral images. That's what counts.
Wahanui. Ia e tupuka ni te rahi, te pai e te whakatupu o te tina no tērā tangata. Ko mohi o ke noatu ngā kaumātua ka pai tēnei tangata hei arataki.
O ke tēnei tūpuna, tangata rongonui, i rutoi i a Ngāti Maniapoto. Tōna whānautanga mai, ko tāna ingoa, ko Reihana, waka hoihoi. Whānau mai ai, tahi mano, waru, rau, rua te kaumā, waru. I tu wā i tupu ake ia, tōna nei hanga, me ngāna tū mahi, kua ri te tonu ki tōna tupuna ki a Wahanui Te Huatare. Nā, ka tapangi anō he ingoa mōna, ka uru mai tēnei ingoa a Wahanui. Nā ka tukuna ki te kura ki a nei ko Three Kings i te rawa, Wesleyan Church. Ngōna nei mahi i reira e whakaako hei minita.
Nā ka kite te iwi, te hoki ngā mai, mo tāna pai te whakatako tō kōrero, ka kīnaki e ngana kōrero ki ngā kupu o te kareipiture. Nō reire e i rongo nui ngi ai ngāna mahi, mo te kaua e kōrero. Ka tū mai e nei me tāna taiaha, o ki te roa rā tērā tangata. He whitu putu te roa tāna taiaha. Tū toro tika ana e ke ana taku tūpuna ta tātu ki te whitu putu. Te hei wā ka peka atua tāwhiao i te kāinga o Wahanui. Te tainga atu ki te kāinga hāmama atu ki a Wahanui. E waha, e ko nei koe, ai, kuhu mai. Te urunga atu ki te wharaka titiro, ai, te moro i tiku ki o tēnei whare. Me hake te kaumātua raka. Ai, engari ko ngā taonga oroto he nui no atu. Ka mati ka mai te kaumātua nei ai tuahi e nohora. Te tūngā ka tūtoro tika tonu ke te kaumātua na ke te rahi o tērā kaumātua, pakaru tonu o te tuonu e tana whare. Nā, ke tu kia tāwhia, titiro ngā ke o tāwhia, nā, ko te rangi tonu tērā tū mai raka. Nā, ko ki te koe te tāhu, te rahi o te kuwhare. Ai, no ka mihi atu te kaumātua raka. No te kaumātua haerenga taka ka piripono tahi rāua, nā ka riro tonu ko ia e iwaha mo tāwhia o.
Tērā kōrero mo te rohe pōtai, i puta mai i roto i ngā mahi a Wahanui. I te 1883 ka hangangi e Wahanui, taunui me erewi, te tehi pitihana ki te karau, mō ngō rātou rohe. Te kōrero e tū ana rāua i te tehi mapi. Ko te kāwanatanga te tehi taha, o Wahanui te tehi taha. Ka unungi e Wahanui tana pōtai, nā ka titai ki runga i te mapi. Ki a Wahanui te rawa, nā, ko tēnā pōtai, koe nā tōku nei rohe. Koe rā te putanga mai o tērā kōrero ko te rohe pōtai. I te hāranga mai o te Pākehā ki roto Waikato. Ko tō rātou pirangi kia tutuki ai te railway ki Ihaka mai i Pōneke. Ka puta e tehi tāngata o te Paramata, ka tae mai ki te kōrero mō te railway ki a Wahanui ma. O te tīmatatanga, ka are rātou i whakae, engari te whakaaro kei wehea painga mō tāna iwi a Ngāti Marino. E whia tau rea pēā rātou e kōrero ana. Te mutunga e hau, ko Wahanui ko taunui i whakae ki ake mai te railway i roto i te rohe pōtai. Whakaengi ara i roto i te whakaaro ka noho tonu ngā whenua I raro I o rātou nei mana. Ko tā whiao, ka rei whakae, ka tā maingi te o ngā tangata a tā whiao I te whakahe, ko tānui te tangata I te taha o Wahanui e kōrero ana. Tūtonu atu a tānui ka kōrero ki ngā iwi nei, no mātou te whenua, ki a mātou kia te whakae o te railway. Mutu tonu atu te rā pakanga I te rāwa.
Ko te ingoa o tawa mere paunama ko tahunu. Kei te whānau tonu e tia ki ana tēnei taonga. O a tahua hei mātakitaki ma te kanohi. Paira hei mātakitaki ma ngā uri whakatupu. Engari kia mātou nei ko te mea nui tonu ko ngā kōrero I kōrerongia ke tia mai e tō mātou tūpuna mō mātou kia mātou. Mō tō tūpuna nei mō Wahanui. Rima o tihe mā, o te tau o tahi mano o warurau iwa te kau māwhitu, ka mate, te kau mātua ne. Ka hanga ngā kau mātua o te rāwa, e whareko atu mōna, I whataroa. E koro Wahanui, moi mai, tō moi ngaroa, I roto o whataroa, moi mai, takoto.
He tangata maraia, he toa, he rangatira hoki. No Ngāti Rārua, no Ngāti Tama, no Te Atiawa, Tāmati Pirimona Marino. I whānau mai ai taku tūpuna a Tāmati Pirimona Marino I te huringa o te rautau ko Pāhurake nei I te ika o Māui. I tai mai ia ki te tauihu I runga I ngā hekenga me ki ko te heke niho mango. Tāmati Pirimona Marino arrived in the top of the south, te tauihu o te waka, with an elite squad of tūpuna known as kai tangata. Now, that's not an iwi. Kai tangata could be likened to a Māori SAS. They're lethal, they're the vanguard of tūpuna that led our people into a new homeland. Ka mate kāinga tahi, ka ora kāinga rua. Tāmati was an enigmatic figure. He was a dichotomy. Whilst on one hand he was part of this elite group of assassins, he's also renowned as a humanitarian. So following the settling of the land, he demonstrated his aroha, his compassion, for the rest of the people living in the broader community. When the settlers first arrived in our area, it was important to him that when he saw them going without, that he petitioned on their behalf to provide them with food and supplies so they didn't live in destitution and poverty. That's the kind of person he was. Tāmati Pirimona was also a bridge between the races. He was recognised for his leadership and appointed by the courts as an assessor of Māori land and called in to help resolve disputes between the Crown and Māori. Forever important to Tāmati were the property rights of Māori. He was particularly concerned with the welfare of our families when the gold rush occurred in the 19th century in the Golden Bay area. He also petitioned on behalf of the broader Māori community to ensure that they too were not disadvantaged by this influx of new people and new faces, securing land titles that have endured through to today. Tāmati was renowned for his business acumen. He was an entrepreneur. In the 1850s, 6 of the 9 ships registered in the port of Nelson were owned by Māori, and 2 of those were owned by Tāmati Pirimona Marino. He traded up and down the coast and was a central figure in the development of the new Māori economy. In 1847, there was a trade issue, a trade dispute between him and another merchant. He was the first Māori to successfully sue a Pākehā in our court system. He was awarded £27 in the first civil dispute between Māori and Pākehā. In 1843, Tāmati married Ihaka Whaanga. In 1846, he sailed a schooner through to Otaki and rescued his wife's people, Te Atiawa, and evacuated them in an emergency. Introduction of new diseases, poverty, things that we had no way of combating, had a devastating impact in the lifetime of my ancestor. Some say when Pākehā first arrived, there were almost 1 million Māori living in New Zealand. Within his lifetime, he saw that drop to less than 40,000. Infertility, child mortality were afflictions common amongst Māori at this period of our history. None of their children lived to carry on their line. When I first laid eyes on his portrait, it was a particularly poignant moment for me. A feeling of loss, feeling of legacy, feeling of responsibility. All these generations later, we are grateful that Lindauer immortalised our tūpuna in this beautiful portrait. It reminds us of his mana, of his legacy, of his escapades, of his character, the colourful world that he lived in. Tāmati lived a full and rewarding life and died in 1877. He was buried in Collingwood, or Aorere, where he was recognised as the rangatira. Our tūpuna left an enduring legacy, such that we carried his portrait, painted by Lindauer, into the Waitangi Tribunal. The descendants of Ngāti Rārua, Te Atiawa and Ngāti Tama, demonstrating how important this tūpuna is to us. Even though today Tamati Marino has no living descendants, we're still his uri, his mokopuna. We have continued the same entrepreneurial legacy and developed our ancestral estate, our lands, to something that I know our tūpuna would be proud of. Tohu wines, Aotearoa seafoods, kono beverages, kono horticulture, Wakatu incorporation, it's all his legacy. He's part of something that he would never have been able to imagine in his lifetime. Tāmati Pirimona, on one hand ruthless, on the other hand humanitarian, full of aroha and compassion for those around him, known for his leadership, his skill, his ability, his acumen, and his generosity. And his leadership and foresight is an inspiration to us. Taku mihi atu ki a koe e taku tūpuna, Mauri ora.
supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.